Thank you to Denise Whitbroat and Fairycat LJT for requesting the Sumerian/Babylonian creation stories. Now, while I may go over the Sumerian creation story in a later video, I chose to go with the Babylonian creation story first, as there is a lot more content to go over in that story, as opposed to the single tablet we have concerning the original Sumerian creation story, which is actually broken and missing many important facets to its mythos. Minus one very obvious and glaring aspect of the story, which I may or may not be spending an entire video going over in the future. Babylon's creation story, however, is a bit more concrete. Literally, as it is being recounted by 7 stone tablets, collectively known as the Enuma Elish, which roughly translated means when on high, relating back to the tablet's first lines. These tablets recount the story of how, in the beginning, there was a swirling vortex of water, which eventually separated itself into 2 parts. Apsu, the deity of fresh water, and Tiamat, the goddess of the salt water. And oh boy is she salty. Oh, and there's also this guy named Mamu who came out of the vortex too. He's pretty important later on. Together, these 2 primal deities mated to produce a new, younger generation of gods and goddesses, beginning with Lamu and Lahamu, and later their younger, and, as officially declared by the Enuma Elish, mightier siblings, Anshar and Kishar. These 2 younger gods bore the primal waters a grandchild in the form of Anu, who is said to be equal to his father in terms of greatness, essentially just letting us, the reader, know that Lahmu and Lahamu are irrelevant. Anyhow, Anu sires a son by the name of Nudimmud, who is said to be the mightiest of the gods by far, vastly superior to his father and grandfather in terms of wisdom, strength, and sex appeal. You may know him by his slightly more famous name, Ea, or by his far more famous name, Enki, as we will see if and when we get to the Sumerian creation story. However, those dirty, rotten kids didn't know when to be quiet. It is said that day and night the younger gods did nothing but create noise which prevented Apsu from sleeping at night, and working during the day. Side note, I guess the Earth just has always existed up to this point. However, the ancient Babylonians believed that unless something was properly named, it still had yet to finish its creation cycle. So technically it was already created, it just wasn't created. Finally, Apsu had enough of this and consults his Grand Vizier, Mamu, as to what he should do. The unintentional rhyme was unintentional. Mamu gives Apsu absolutely sage advice and tells him that if he wishes to have peace, he should just slaughter all of his children. Apsu actually decides to go along with this plan, much to the dismay of his wife Tiamat, who runs off to warn Enki of his great-grandfather's plan to kill him and all of the younger gods. Wait. Haven't we seen this somewhere before? I feel like we've seen this somewhere before. And so, in a preemptive strike against his ancestral father, Enki conjures up a sleeping spell, because he can do magic now, just go along with it, afflicts Apsu with his magic, and then brutally murders him, locks away Mamu, and then names his new palace Apsu after his murder victim. Neat. There he and his wife of unspecified origin, Damkina. Damn, Kina!
Damn, boy, he's thick! Boy, that's a thick-ass boy! Damn!
Settled down and had a son named Marduk, who was probably the most important figure in early Babylonian mythology. Several years then passed, and an outraged Tiamat had been busy gathering her army to inflict vengeance against Enki and the younger gods, angered by their actions in killing Apsu. This army was headed by Tiamat's new husband and general to her armies, Kingu, whom she had gifted the most powerful artifacts in Babylonian mythology, the Tablets of Destiny. It was said that whoever held these tablets would have control over all of destiny. And so, in order to not lose them, Kingu affixed the Tablets of Destiny to his breastplate, like a suit of armor. Also in Kingu's army, there were a few of the younger gods who chose to side with their matriarch, and also 12 horrible monsters with such strength that even the mighty Enki could not slay them. So needless to say, the ball wasn't exactly in the younger gods' court. Anshar, the chieftain among the younger gods, had but one option left, and that was to consult Marduk, the most valiant and powerful among them, to take a stand against Tiamat. Marduk agreed, but on the condition that everyone acknowledge what a great god he was, and that he was just better than everyone else. Which the gods just kind of went along with. Wait, I thought that was supposed to be his dad. Then the day for battle came, with Kingu leading up the armies of Tiamat and Marduk heading up the armies of the younger gods. Before the battle began, however, Marduk taunted the eldest goddess, proclaiming her a fool to put someone like Kingu on the same pedestal as his great-grandfather Anshar. But not only that, but to confirm upon him the tablets of destiny. Marduk then gives a rousing anime speech about how the times of the old gods are over, and it is now time for the new gods to take the reins, and that rather than try to be malicious and kill her own children, Tiamat should be proud that her children are willing to step up to the plate. And also throwing some shade against Kingu, proclaiming that since he is not worthy of the power held within the Tablets of Destiny, he would not be able to control their powers. Which, spoiler alert, he actually wasn't. This only serves to ruffle Tiamat's jammies even more, to the point where Marduk had her right where he wanted her. Using her own rage against her, Marduk challenged the goddess to single combat for supremacy over the universe, a challenge that his great-great-great-grandmother could not refuse. At first, the battle went in Tiamat's favor, suppressing Marduk to the point in which she almost had him in the clutches of her jaws. However, it is at this point that I must give it to the Babylonians, because they thought up quite possibly the most creative kill I've ever seen in a mythological text. So as Tiamat is about to swallow her ancestral son, Marduk releases the winds of evil, blasting straight down the goddess's throat and windpipe and down into her body, where the winds did their work in messing her up from the inside and presumably causing her to inflate like something you accidentally run into on DeviantArt. It was then that Marduk raised his bow and shot an arrow into the goddess's midriff, popping her apart like an inflated balloon, essentially splitting the goddess in two.
Oh, that's brutal.
After this, Marduk stands upon Tiamat's corpse and watches as her army flees in terror, only to be encircled by the armies of the younger gods. The treacherous gods were imprisoned for all eternity. Kingu had the Tablets of Destiny stripped away from him and was handed off to Uggae, the god of death, but only for a little while. As for the 12 beasts who Tiamat had created to combat the gods, we don't know. You see, because the tablets have a tendency to break sometimes, when they do break apart, part of the text contained within them is lost to history. Thankfully, however, we get the slightest bit of closure, as when the tablets pick back up, it opens with this line. For all their resistance, he trampled them underfoot, implying that Marduk stomped their heads in until they were all dead. Although in some summaries of the myth compiled from later accounts, it is said that Marduk actually wrestles all of the demons into submission and then makes some fancy shoes out of their hides until PETA shamed him online into taking them off. And speaking in terms of Tiamat's corpse, after being split in half, her eyes began to well up with tears. These streams of tears then eventually became the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which, if you know anything about early civilizations, are the two most important rivers in the development of the cradle of humanity. That is, until Marduk smashes her face in with a mace and then uses her corpse to create the firmaments.
Oh, that's brutal.
Later, Enki approaches his son about the prospect of creating humans to populate the land, a prospect that his son takes an interest in, yet speculates on who would create the first humans and out of what. It was later decided that they should use Kingu, as it was him who spurred Tiamat into going into war against the rest of the gods. Kingu was brought before them, and as punishment for his misdeeds, had his blood vessels ripped out from his body.
Oh, that's brutal.
Out of the obvious mess that this created, Enki fashioned the first man, Lulu. Okay. And tasked him and his progeny to maintain the peace on Earth, and to leave the gods to their own devices. And that's right about where the story ends. Yeah, I know I said that the Babylonian creation story had a lot more to it than the Sumerian creation story, but still, they only had about 7 tablets to go off of, many of which had chunks of the story missing out of them. But wait until you see the Sumerian creation story. Still, 'tis a far better fate than the Celts, who had to have their creation story recreated from the ground up as a combination of multiple variations of myths and legends, to the point in where it's sort of a proto-Frankenstein mess. So in conclusion, I would summarize the Babylonian creation myth as short and Thank you all so much for watching. If you have a request for another mythology you'd like for me to cover in the future, leave a request for it in the comment section down below. I'm sure I'll get around to it eventually. If you guys are interested in supporting the channel, I will also leave a link to my Patreon down below. And if you would just like to have a general discussion with me and other people who are big enough nerds to actually get into mythology, I also have a Discord, which will also be linked down below. Until next time, I've been Messiahs and Mythologies, and I will be seeing all of you later.